Aho, mitakuye ase. Hello, all my relations. How y'all doing? My name is the Lucky Coyote, and today we are going to be reading some more Brothers Grimm. So I hope y'all will enjoy that. Today was a really long day, but it's the weekend, so that means nice and relaxing times. It's going to be a hot weekend. So, still debating back and forth on whether or not I want to go swimming or not for like the last time this year before it starts getting too cold. Anyway, with that, we should probably get to it. So, let's head on over and start telling some stories. All right, and I don't even have to change the title this time. As we're completing or continuing this from last week, because I do not have practice today for Marvel Rivals, which is why we had to cut it so short last time. But if you recall, we were following around with the tailor and the shoemaker. I believe it was the shoemaker. It was the shoemaker, where the tailor was really good and the shoemaker was kind of an ass, constantly taking advantage of him. But they were wandering around, and eventually the tailor fell under misfortune till eventually came back. Whereas, like, he ran into a bee, like a bunch of bees, and then a bunch of other things. Stork, no such things. Anyway, let us continue. The tailor perceived at once that nothing was to be had there. 3 empty dishes, and nothing in the 4th is a bad meal, he thought to himself, and, trudging on, he soon got into the city, where, as it was about noon, he found a dinner ready cooked in the inn, and gladly sat down to table. When he was satisfied, he determined to go and seek work, and, as he walked around the city, he soon found a master, who gave him a good welcome. Since, however, he knew his business thoroughly, it very soon happened that he became quite famed, and everybody would have his new coat made by the little tailor. Every day added to his consequence, and he said to himself, "I can get no higher in my art, and yet every day trade gets brisker." At length he was appointed court tailor. But how things do turn out! The same day his former comrade was made court shoemaker. And when he saw the tailor, and remarked that his eyes were as bright and good as ever, his conscience pricked him. But he thought to himself, "Before he revenges himself on me, I must lay a snare for him." Now, he who digs a pit for another often falls into it himself. In the evening, when the shoemaker had left off work, and was become quite dark, he slipped up to the king and whispered, "May it please your majesty, this tailor is a high-minded fellow, and has boasted that he can procure again the crown which has been lost so long." "That would please me much," replied the king, "but let the tailor come here tomorrow." When he came, the king ordered him to find the crown again, or to leave the city forever. "Oh ho, oh ho," thought the tailor. "A rogue gives more than he has. If the crusty old king desires from me what no man can procure, I will not wait till morning, but this very day make my escape out of the town." So thinking, he tied together his bundle and marched out of the gate. but it grieved him sorely to give up his business and to turn his back upon the city wherein he had been so fortunate. Soon he came to the pond where he had made acquaintance with the ducks, and there sat the old one, whose children he had spared by the shore, plumbing herself with her bill. She recognized him, and asked why he hung his head so. "You will not wonder," he replied, "when you hear what has happened," and he told her his story. "If that be all," said the duck, "we can assist you. The crown has fallen into the water, and lies at the bottom, whence we will soon fetch it. Meanwhile, spread your handkerchief out on the shore." With these words, the duck dived down with her 12 young ones, and in 5 minutes they were up again, carrying the crown, which, resting on the old bird's wings, was borne up by the bills of the 12 ducklings who swam around. They came to shore and laid the crown on the handkerchief. You could not believe how beautiful it was, for when the sun shone on it, it glittered like 100 carbuncles. The tailor tied it up in his handkerchief and carried it to the king, who was so much pleased that he gave its finder a chain of gold to hang round his neck. When the shoemaker found his first plan had failed, he contrived a second, and, stepping before the king, said, "May it please your majesty, the tailor has grown so high-minded again. He boasts he can model in wax the whole castle, and all that is in it, fixed and unfixed, indoors and outdoors." The king thereupon caused the tailor to be summoned, and ordered him to model in wax the whole castle and everything inside and outside, and if he did not complete it, or even omitted one nail upon the wall, he should be kept prisoner underground all his lifetime. The tailor thought to himself, "It comes harder and harder upon me. No man can do that." And, throwing his bundle over his shoulder, he walked out at the gate. When he came to the hollow tree, he sat down and hung his head in despair. The bees came flying out, and the queen asked if he had a stiff neck, because he kept his head in such a position. "Oh, no," he replied, "something else oppresses me." And he related what the king had demanded of him. The bees thereupon began to hum and buzz together, and the queen said to the tailor, "Go home now, but return in the morning, and bring a great napkin with you, and about this hour all will be ready." So he returned home, and the bees flew to the royal palace, right in at the open window, crept into every corner, and observed all things in the most minute manner. Then they flew back, and formed a castle in wax with great speed, so that it was ready by the evening. The next morning the tailor came, and there stood the whole beautiful building, with not a nail upon the wall or a tile upon the roof omitted, but all was delicately white, and, moreover, as sweet as sugar. The tailor wrapped it carefully in his cloth, and took it to the king, who could not sufficiently admire it, and gave him a house made of stone as a reward. 12 ducklings on one crown. That's a huge crown. Yep. Joke's on him, they just want the napkin. I knew it. The shoemaker, however, was not satisfied, and went again to the king, and said, "May it please your majesty, it has come to the ears of the tailor that no water springs in the castle yard, and he has therefore boasted that it shall gush up in the middle, clear as crystal." The king ordered the tailor to be summoned, and told him that if a stream of water was not running the following morning, as he had said, the executioner should make him a head shorter in that very court. The poor tailor did not think very long, but rushed out of the gate, and, as he remembered his life was in danger, tears rolled down his cheeks. Whilst he sat thus, full of grief, the filly came jumping towards him to which he had once given liberty, and which had become a fine brown horse. "Now the hour is come," it said to the tailor, "when I can reward your kindness. I know already what you need, and will soon assist you. But now sit upon my back, which should carry two like you." The tailor's heart came again, and he vaulted into the saddle, and the horse carried him at full speed into the town, and straight to the castle yard. There it coursed thrice around, as quick as lightning, and at the third time fell down. At the same moment a fearful noise was heard, and a piece out of the ground of the court sprang up into the air like a ball, and bounded away far over the castle. At the same time a stream of water, as high as the man and his horse, and as clear as crystal, played up and down like a fountain, and the sunbeams danced on it. As soon as the king saw this, he was astounded, and went up and embraced the tailor before all his court. "You will never be worthy, never! Nay, you are never worthy." I just have to turn off the alerts. So you'll see the alerts, just no sound. So that way it doesn't interrupt. But this fortune did not last long. The king had daughters enough, and each one prettier than the other, but no son at all. Now the wicked shoemaker went for the fourth time to the king and said, "May it please your majesty, the tailor is as high-minded as ever. Now he has boasted that, if he might, he could bring the king a son down from the air." Thereupon the king ordered the tailor to be summoned, and said, "If you bring me a son within 9 days, you shall have my eldest daughter as a wife." "The reward is immense," thought the tailor, "and one may as well have it as another. But now the cherries hang too high for me, and if I climb after them, the branches will break beneath me, and I shall fall down." So thinking, he went home, set himself with his legs crossed under him upon his work-table, and considered what he should do. "It is of no use," he cried at length. "I must be off. I cannot rest in peace here." So he tied up his bundle and hurried out the door. But just as he arrived upon the meadow, he perceived his old friend the stork, who, like a world with man, walked up and down a while, stood still, and considered a frog nearer, and at length snapped it up. The stork came up and greeted him. "I see," it said, "you have your bundle upon your back. Why have you left the city?" The tailor told the stork what the king had commanded of him, and how, as he could not do it, he was grieving at his ill luck. "Do not let your grey hairs grow on that account," replied the stork. "I will assist you out of your trouble. Sometimes already I have brought infants into the city, and I can also fetch a little prince out of the spring. Go home and keep quiet. In 9 days return to the royal palace, and I will come thither also." The tailor went home, and on the right day went to the palace. In a short time the stork came flying through the air and knocked at the window. The tailor opened it, and Cousin Longlegs marched gravely in, and with stately steps passed over the marble floors, carrying in his beak a child, as beautiful to look at as an angel, and already stretching out his hands toward the queen. The stork laid it upon her lap, and she embraced and kissed it, almost beside herself with joy. Before he flew away, he took a knapsack off his shoulder and handed it to the queen, and therein were dates and colored bonbons, which were divided among the princesses, but the eldest received none, because she took instead the merry young tailor as husband. "It seems to me," said the tailor, "as if I had won a great game. My mother rightly said, 'He who trusts in God and his own fortune will never go amiss.'" Amelia Miller, 27. Thank you for the follow. Thank you for following. The shoemaker had to make shoes in which the tailor danced at the wedding, and as soon as he had done them, he was ordered to leave the city. The road from thence to the forest led him past the gallows, and from rage, disappointment, and weariness with the heat of the day, he threw himself on the ground beneath it. As soon as he had closed his eyes and prepared to go to sleep, the two crows flew down from the heads of the two criminals, and with loud cries pecked out the shoemaker's eyes. Insane with rage and pain, he ran into the forest, and there he must have perished, for nobody has seen or heard anything of the wicked shoemaker ever since. Thus ends The Two Wanderers. This next story is entitled The Experienced Huntsman. Oh, Hunin and Mugen. Oh, huntsman. Hunter, not hunters. Can't spell. I can spell. I spelled hunters. Oh, okay. You can't spell. Got it. Where did you get the child? All storks have children. You didn't know this? They just keep human children hanging around. So let us continue. The Experienced Huntsman by the Brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time a young lad who, after he had learnt the art of making locks, told his father he wished to go and seek his fortune in the world. "Well," said the father, "very well, I am contented," and gave him money for the journey. So he set off, looking about for work, but after a while he determined to follow his trade no longer, for he had got tired of it, and wished to learn the art of hunting. While he was in the mood, he met a huntsman, dressed in green, who asked him whence he came, and whither he would go. The youth told him he was a locksmith, but his business did not suit him any longer, and he had a wish to learn how to shoot, if he would take him as a pupil. "Oh, yes," replied the other. "Come with me." The youth accompanied him, and for several years abode with him while he learned the art of hunting. Afterwards he wished to leave, but the huntsman gave him no further reward than an air gun, which had the property of missing nothing at which it was fired. With this gift he went off, and by came to a very large forest, to which he could find no end the first day. So he perched himself upon a lofty tree, where the wild beasts could not reach him. Towards midnight it seemed to him that a light was glimmering at a distance, and he peeped through the boughs in order to mark more exactly where it was. Then, taking his hat, he threw it in that direction, that it might serve as a guide for him when he had descended the tree. And as soon as he was down, he ran after his hat. Putting it on again, he walked straight ahead. The further he went, the larger the light appeared, and when he came nearly up to it, he discovered that it was caused by a great fire, round which 3 giants were sitting, watching the roasting of an ox, which hung on a spit above it. Just at that moment, one of the giants said he would taste and see if the meat were done enough, and, tearing a piece off, he was going to put it in his mouth, when the huntsman shot it clean out of his hand. "Now then," cried the giant, "the wind blows the meat out of my hand." And, taking another piece, he was about to bite it, when the huntsman shot it out of his hand. Thereupon he gave the giant next to him a box on the ear, saying angrily, "Why did you snatch my piece away?" "I did not take it away," replied the other. "It was some sharpshooter who shot it away." So the giant took a third piece, but that also he could not hold, for the huntsman shot it away. "This must be a good shot," cried all the giants. "A man who can shoot away the food from one's mouth would be very useful to us." And then, speaking louder, they called to him, "Come, you sharpshooter, sit down by our fire, and eat till you are satisfied, and we will do you no harm. But if you don't come, and we have to fetch you, you will be lost." At these words, the huntsman stepped up to the fire, and said he was an experienced huntsman, so much so that whatever he aimed at, he shot, without ever missing. The giants said that if he would go with them, he should be well treated, and they told him, besides, that out of the forest there was a large piece of water, on the other side of which was a tower, wherein dwelt a beautiful princess, whom they desired to possess. The huntsman said he would willingly fetch her, and they further told him that outside the tower lay a little dog, which would begin to bark as soon as it saw anyone approach, and immediately it did so, everybody would wake up in the royal palace, and it was on that account they had never been able to enter, and therefore he must first shoot the dog. To this the huntsman assented, declaring it was a mere play, and soon afterwards he went on board a ship and sailed over the water, and as he neared the land, the little dog came running down and would have barked, but he, aiming with his air gun, shot it dead. As soon as the giants saw this was done, they were very glad, and they thought he had the princess for certain. But the huntsman told them to remain where they were until he called them, for he must first see how it was to be accomplished. He went into the castle and found everybody as still as mice, for they were fast asleep. And as he entered the first room, he saw a saber hanging up, made of pure silver, and ornamented with a golden star and the king's name. Below it stood a table, whereupon laid a sealed letter, which he broke open and read that whoever possessed the saber could bring to life whomever it passed. the huntsman took the saber down from the wall, and, hanging it around him, walked on till he came to a room where the king's daughter lay asleep. She was so beautiful that he stood still and looked at her, holding his breath while he thought, "How dare I deliver this innocent maiden into the power of these giants with their evil intentions?" He peeped about, and under the bed espied a pair of slippers. On the right one was marked the king's name with a star, and on the left his daughter's, also with a star. She had also a large handkerchief over her, woven of silk and gold, having on the right side her father's name, and on the left her own, all done in golden threads. So the huntsman took a knife and cut off the right corner, and then he took the slipper with the king's name in it, and put them both in his knapsack. All the while the princess remained quite passive, and as she was wrapped up in a sheet, the huntsman cut off a piece of that, as well as the handkerchief, and put it in his knapsack with the others. All these things he did without touching her, and afterwards went away without noise. When he got outside, he found the 3 giants, who were waiting in expectation that he would bring the princess with him. He shouted to them to come in, for the maiden was already in his power, but he could not open the door, and therefore they must creep through a hole which was in the wall. The first giant came, and, as soon as he poked his head through the hole, the huntsman seized him by the hair and chopped his head off with the saber. Then he pulled the body through, and called the second, whose head he chopped off likewise, and then the third giant shared the same fate. As soon as this was done, he cut out the tongue of each and put it in his knapsack, rejoicing to think he had freed the princess from her enemies. He resolved next to visit his father and show him what he had done, and afterwards to travel again about the world, for, said he, "The fortune which God apportions to me will reach me anywhere." Isn't silver a weaker metal? It is. It will not stand up to cutting very easily. I mean, they do make silverware, but they don't make silver knives very easily unless they're for butter. And you have to constantly polish them because they oxidize very quickly. Anyway, back to the story. Meanwhile, the king of the castle, when he awoke, had perceived the 3 giants lying dead in the hall, and, going into his daughter's apartment, he awoke her and inquired who it was that had destroyed the giants. "I do not know, dear father," she replied. "I have been sleeping." But when she arose and wished to put on her slippers, she found the one for the right foot missing, and her handkerchief also wanted the right-hand corner, which had been cut off, as well as a piece out of the sheet. The king thereupon caused the whole court to be assembled, soldiers and everyone, and then put the question, who had freed his daughter and put to death the giants? Now the king had a captain, a one-eyed and ugly man, who said he had done it. The old king, therefore, declared that since he was he must marry the princess. But as soon as he said to the prince so, the princess exclaimed, "Rather than marry him, dear father, I will wander over the world as far as my feet will carry me." The king replied she might do as she pleased, but if she would not marry the man, she must take off her royal clothes and put on peasant's clothes to travel in, and also she must go to a potter and begin business in the earthenware trade. So the king's daughter drew off her royal clothes and went to a potter, whom she hired a crate of earthenware and promised that if she had sold them by the evening, she would pay for them. The king commanded her to sit at a certain corner of the market, across which he ordered that several wagons should be driven, so as to crush in pieces all the crockery. By and by, therefore, when the princess had stationed herself in the appointed place, the wagons came driving past and smashed her goods. Thereupon she began to cry, saying, "Ah, heaven, how am I to pay the potter?" But the king hoped by this means to have compelled his daughter to marry the captain, instead of which she went to the potter and asked if he would trust her with another crate. He refused till she should pay for the former one, and so the princess was forced to go crying and groaning to her father that she wished to wander into the wide world. The king said, "I will cause a cottage to be built in the middle of the wood, wherein you shall sit all your lifetime, and cook for anybody who comes, but without taking money for it." When the house was ready, a sign was hung over the door, on which was inscribed, "Gratis today, tomorrow payment." There she sat for a long time, while it was talked about in the world around that a maiden sat in a cottage in the wood and cooked gratis, and was stated on a sign over the door. This the huntsman heard, and he thought to himself, "This is good news for me, who am so poor, to have no money." So he took his air gun and knapsack, in which he kept all the memorials he had brought away from the castle, and, going into the forest, came soon to the cottage where was written up, "Gratis today, tomorrow payment." Now he had the sword buckled round him, which he had used to execute the 3 giants, and he stepped into the cottage and ordered something to eat. The princess asked him whence he came and whither he was going, and he replied, "I am wandering about the world." She asked next where he procured his sword, on which she perceived her father's name. "Are you the daughter of the king?" he inquired, and, as she nodded assent, he said, "With this sword I have cut off the heads of 3 giants." And he held up the 3 tongues for a token, together with the slipper and the pieces which had been cut off the handkerchief and sheet. The princess was glad to see these things, and told the huntsman it was he who had saved her. Then they went to the king, and the princess led him to her chamber, and declared that it was the huntsman who had delivered her from the 3 giants. The king at first would not believe, but as soon as he was shown the tokens, he could no longer doubt, and, in order to show his pleasure and his gratitude, he promised his daughter to the huntsman as his wife, which pleased the princess very much. Afterwards, the king ordered a grand banquet, whereat the huntsman appeared as a distinguished stranger. When they sat down to table, the captain took his place on the left hand of the king's daughter and the huntsman, whom the former believed to be a visitor of rank, on the right. When they had finished eating and drinking, the old king told the captain he would propound a question which he must answer, and it was this: "If one should say he had killed 3 giants, and was asked therefore where the tongues of the giants were, and should then go seek them and find none, how would he explain that?" "By saying they had had none," replied the captain. "Not so," said the king. "Every creature has a tongue. Therefore, what would such an one deserve for his answer?" "To be torn in pieces," said the captain boldly. "You have pronounced your own sentence. said the king to the captain, who was first imprisoned and afterwards torn in 4 pieces. But the huntsman was married to the king's daughter, and after the wedding he invited his father and mother to live with him, and after the old king's death, the huntsman ascended the throne. Thus ends The Experienced Huntsman. Scandalous, yes, scandalous! So this next tale is entitled Professor Know-All. So let us begin. Professor Know-All by the Brothers Grimm. A long time ago, there lived a peasant named Crab, who one day drove into a certain city, his cart laden with a bundle of logs, drawn by 2 oxen. He soon found a purchaser for his wood in the person of a learned professor, who bought it for $2. And, while the money was being counted out, the peasant, peeping in at the door, saw how comfortably his customer was eating and drinking, and he thought thereupon came into his head that he would like to be a professor too. So he waited a little while, and at last mustered courage to ask whether he could not be a professor. "Oh, yes," replied the professor. "That can soon be managed." "What must I do?" asked the peasant. "First of all, buy an ABC book, one which has cock-a-doodle-doo for a frontispiece. Secondly, sell your cart and oxen, and turn them into money to buy good clothes with. And what else belongs to a professor's apprentice? Lastly, let a sign be painted with the words, 'I am the Professor Know-All,' and nail that over your house door." The countryman did all that he was told, and after he had practiced a little time, but not to much purpose, a certain very wealthy baron had some money stolen from him. Mention was made to the baron of this Professor Know-All, who dwelt in such a village, and who would sure be to know where the money was gone. As soon as the baron heard of him, he ordered his horses and his carriage and drove to the place where the professor lived. The baron inquired if he were the Professor Know-All, and he replying, "Yes," the baron said he must return with him and discover his money. "Very well," replied the professor, "but my wife Gertrude must accompany me." To this the baron agreed, and, after all being seated in the carriage, away they drove back again. When they arrived at the house, a splendid collation was on the table, of which the professor was invited to partake. "Certainly," said he, "but my wife Gertrude too." And he sat down with her at the bottom of the table. As soon as the first servant entered with a dish of delicate soup, the professor poked his wife, saying, "He is the first," meaning he was the first who had brought in meat. But the servant imagined he meant to say, "He is the first thief," and, because he really was so, he felt very much disturbed, and told his comrades in the kitchen, "The professor knows all. We shall come off badly, for he has said I am the first." When the second servant heard this, he felt afraid to go, but he was obliged, and as soon as he entered the room with his dish, The man poked his wife again, and said, "Gertrude, that is the second." This frightened the servant so much that he left the room as soon as possible, and the third servant, who entered, fared no better. For the professor said to his wife, "That is the third." The fourth servant had to bring in a covered dish, and the Baron said to the professor he must show his powers by telling truly what was in the dish. Now there were crabs in it, but the peasant looked at the dish, ignorant how to get himself out of the scrape, till at last he cried out, "Oh, poor crab that I am!" When the Baron heard this, he exclaimed, "Good! He knows it! He knows, too, where the money is!" The servant, however, was terribly frightened, and he winked to the professor to follow him out. When he had done so, he found all 4 servants there who had stolen the money, and were now so eager to get off that they offered him a large sum if he would not betray them, for if he did, their necks would be in danger. They led him also to the place where the money lay hid, and the professor was so pleased that he gave them the required promise, and then returned to the house, where he sat down again at table, and, producing his book, said, "I will now look in my book, Baron, and discover the place where the money lies." A 5th servant, who had had a share in the robbery, wished to hear if the professor knew more, so he crept up the chimney to listen. Below sat the countryman, turning the leaves of his book backwards and forwards, forwards and backwards, looking for the cock-a-doodle-doo. However, he could not find it, and he at length exclaimed, "You must come out, for I know you are in." This made the servant up the chimney believe he meant him, and down he slipped and got out crying, "The man knows all! The man knows all!" Then Professor Know-all showed the Baron where the money lay, but he said nothing about who had stolen it, so that from both sides he received a large sum of money as a reward, and, moreover, he became a very celebrated character. Thus ends the story of Professor Know-all. This next story is entitled Bearskin. So let us continue. Bearskin by the Brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time a young fellow who enlisted for a soldier and became so brave and courageous that he was always on the front ranks when it rained bullets. As long as the war lasted, all went well, but when peace was concluded, he received his discharge, and the captain told him he might go where he liked. His parents, meanwhile, had died, and as he had no longer any home to go to, he paid a visit to his brothers and asked them to give him shelter until war broke out again. His brothers, however, were hard-hearted and said, "What could we do with you? We could make nothing of you. See to what you have brought yourself," and so turned a deaf ear. The poor soldier had nothing but his musket left, so he mounted this on his shoulder and set out on tramp. By and by he came to a great heath with nothing on it but a circle of trees, under which he sat down, sorrowfully considering his fate. "I have no money," thought he. "I have learned nothing but soldiering, and now, since peace is concluded, there is no need of me. I see well enough I shall have to starve." All at once he heard a rustling, and as he looked round, he perceived a stranger standing before him, dressed in a grey coat, who looked very stately, but had an ugly cloven foot. "I know well what you need," said this being. "Gold and other possessions you shall have, as much as you can spend. But first I must know whether you are a coward or not, that I may not spend my money foolishly." "A soldier and a coward," replied the other. "That cannot be. You may put me to any proof." "Well then," replied the stranger, "look behind you." The soldier turned and saw a huge bear, which eyed him very ferociously. "Oh-ho!" cried he, "I will tickle your nose for you, that you shall give us the pleasure of grumbling." And, raising his musket, he shot the bear in the forehead, so that he tumbled in a heap upon the ground, and did not stir afterwards. Thereupon the stranger said, "I see quite well that you are not wanting in courage, but there is yet one condition which you must fulfill." "If it does not interfere with my future happiness," said the soldier, who had remarked who it was that addressed him, "if it does not interfere with that, I shall not hesitate." "That you must see about yourself," said the stranger. "For the next 7 years you must not wash yourself, nor comb your hair or beard. Neither must you cut your nails, nor say one pater noster, which is Our Father, or the Lord's Prayer. Then I will give you this coat and mantle, which you must wear during these 7 years, and if you die within that time, you are mine. But if you live, you are rich and free all your life long." The soldier reflected for a while on his great necessities, and, remembering how often he had braved death, he at length consented and ventured to accept the offer. Thereupon the evil one pulled off the grey coat, handed it to the soldier, and said, "If you at any time search in the pocket of your coat when you have it on, you will always find your hand full of money." Then he also pulled off the skin of the bear, and said, "That shall be your cloak and your bed. You must sleep on it, and not dare to lie in any other bed. And on this account you shall be called Bearskin." Immediately the evil one disappeared. The soldier now put on the coat, and dipped his hands into the pockets to assure himself of the reality of the transaction. Then he hung the bearskin around himself, and went about the world, chuckling at his good luck, and buying whatever suited his fancy, which money could purchase. For the first year, his appearance was not very remarkable, but in the second he began to look quite a monster. His hair covered almost all his face, his beard appeared like a piece of dirty cloth, his nails were claws, and his countenance was so covered with dirt that one might have grown caress upon it if one had sown seed. Whoever looked at him ran away, but because he gave the poor in every place gold coin, they prayed that he might not die during the 7 years, and because he paid liberally everywhere, he found a night's lodging without difficulty. In the 4th year, he came to an inn where the landlord would not take him in, and refused even to give him a place in his stables, lest the horses should be frightened and become restive. However, when Bearskin put his hand into his pocket and drew it out full of gold ducats, The landlord yielded the point, and gave him a place in the outbuildings, but not till he had promised that he would not show himself, for fear the inn should gain a bad name. While Bearskin sat by himself in the evening, wishing from his heart that the 7 years were over, he heard in the corner a loud groan. Now the old soldier had a compassionate heart, so he opened the door and saw an old man weeping violently and wringing his hands. Bearskin stepped nearer, but the old man jumped up and tried to escape. But when he recognized a human voice, he let himself be persuaded, and by kind words and soothings on the part of the old soldier, he at length disclosed the cause of his distress. His property had dwindled away by degrees, and he and his daughters would have to starve, for he was so poor that he had not the money to pay the host, and would therefore be put into prison. "If you have no care except that," replied Bearskin, "I have money enough." And, causing the landlord to be called, he paid him, and put a purse full of gold besides into the pocket of the old man. The latter, when he saw himself released from his troubles, knew not how to be sufficiently grateful, and said to the soldier, "Come with me. My daughters are all wonders of beauty, so choose one of them for your wife. When they hear what you have done for me, they will not refuse you. You appear certainly an uncommon man, but they will soon put you to rights." This speech pleased Bearskin, and he went with the old man. As soon as the eldest daughter saw him, she was so terrified at his countenance that she shrieked out and ran away. The second one stopped and looked at him from head to foot, but at last she said, "How can I take a husband who has not a bit of a human countenance? The grizzly bear would have pleased me better, who came to see us once, and gave himself out as a man, for he wore a hussar's hat and had white gloves on besides." But the youngest daughter said, "Dear father, this must be a good man who has assisted you out of your troubles. If you have promised him a bride for the service, your word must be kept." It was a pity the man's face was covered with dirt and hair, else one would have seen how he laughed as he heard these words. Bearskin took a ring off his finger, broke it in two, and giving the youngest daughter one half, he kept the other for himself. On her half he wrote his name, and on his own he wrote hers, and begged her to preserve it carefully. Thereupon he took leave, saying, "For 3 years longer I must wander about. If I come back again, then we will celebrate our wedding. But if I do not, you are free, for I shall be dead. But pray to God that he will preserve my life." When he was gone, the poor bride clothed herself in black, and whenever she thought of her bridegroom, burst into tears. From her sisters she received nothing but scorn and mocking. "Pay great attention when he shakes your hand," said the eldest, "and you will see his beautiful claws." "Take care," said the second. "Bears are fond of sweets, and if you please him, he will eat you up, perhaps." "You must mind and do his will," continued the eldest, "or he will begin growling." And the second daughter said further, "But the wedding will certainly be merry, for bears dance well." The bride kept silence, and would not be drawn from her purpose by all these taunts, and meanwhile Bearskin wandered about in the world, doing good where he could, and giving liberally to the poor, for which they had prayed heartily for him. At length the last day of the 7 years approached, and Bearskin went and sat down again on the heath, beneath the circle of trees. In a very short time the wind whistled, and the evil one presently stood before him and looked at him with a vexed face. He threw the soldier his old coat, and demanded his grey one back. "We have not got so far yet," replied Bearskin. "You must clean me first." Then the evil one had, whether he liked it or no, to fetch water, wash the old soldier, comb his hair out, and cut his nails. This done, he appeared again like a brave warrior, and indeed was very much handsomer than before. As soon as the evil one had disappeared, Bearskin became quite light-hearted, and going to the nearest town, he bought a fine velvet coat, and hired a carriage drawn by 4 white horses, in which he was driven to the house of his bride. Nobody knew him. The father took him for some celebrated general, and led him into the room where his daughters were. He was compelled to sit down between the 2 eldest, and they offered him wine, and heaped his plate with the choicest morsels, for they thought they had never seen any one so handsome before. But the bride sat opposite to him, dressed in black, neither opening her eyes nor speaking a word. At length the soldier asked the father if he would give him one of his daughters to wife, and immediately the 2 elder sisters arose, and ran to their chambers to dress themselves out in their most becoming clothes, for each thought she should be chosen. Meanwhile the stranger, as soon as he found himself alone with his bride, pulled out the half of the ring, and threw it into a cup of wine, which he handed across the table. She took it, and as soon as she had drunk it, and seen the half-ring lying at the bottom, her heart beat rapidly, and she produced the other half, which she wore round her neck on a riband. She held them together, and they joined each other exactly, and the stranger said, "I am your bridegroom, whom you saw first as Bearskin, but through God's mercy I have regained my human form, and am myself once more." With these words he embraced and kissed her, and at the same time the 2 eldest sisters entered in full costume. As soon as they saw that the very handsome man had fallen to the share of their youngest sister, and heard that he was the same as Bearskin, they ran out of the house full of rage and jealousy. Thus ends the tale of Bearskin. This one I'm certain Suzu will like. It is entitled Hans the Hedgehog. So let us begin. Hans the Hedgehog by the brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who had quite enough of money and property to live upon, but rich as he was, he lacked one piece of fortune. He had no children. Oftentimes, when he went to market with the other farmers, they laughed at him and asked why he had no children. At length he flew into a passion, and when he came home, he said, "I will have a child, and it shall be a hedgehog," which is a small mammal with quills like a porcupine, according to the notes in the book. Soon after this speech, a child was born to him, which was like a hedgehog in the upper part of his body, and formed as a boy below. And when his wife saw it, she was frightened, and cried, "See what you have wished for!" So the man said, "It cannot be helped now, and it must be christened, but we can procure no godfather for it." "We cannot call him anything else than Hans the Hedgehog," said his wife. And when the priest baptized him, he said, "On account of his spikes, he can sleep in no common cradle." So behind the stove a little straw was laid, upon which the child slept, and there he kept for 8 years, till his father grew tired of him and wished he might die. However, the child did not, but remained in a torpid state. And one day the farmer resolved to go to a fair which was to be held in the neighboring town. He asked his wife what he should bring home, and she told him, "A little piece of meat and a couple of rolls of bread for the housekeeping." Then he asked the servant, and she requested a couple of pots and a pair of stockings. Lastly, he asked Hans what he liked, and the child replied, "Bring me, father, a bagpipe." Accordingly, when the farmer returned home, he brought his wife the meat and bread, his servant the pots and stockings, and Hans the Hedgehog the bagpipe. As soon as Hans received his gift, he said, "Father, go to the smithy and let the cock be bridled, that I may ride away upon it and never return." The father was glad to be freed from his son, and caused the cock to be harnessed, and as soon as it was ready, Hans the Hedgehog set himself upon it and rode away, taking with him a boar and an ass, which he meant to tend in the forest. But in the forest the cock flew to the top of a lofty tree with him on its back, and there he watched the boar and ass for many years, until there were many of them, and all the time his father knew nothing of him. While Hans sat on the treetop, he played upon his bagpipe and made beautiful music. And once a king came riding past who had lost his way in the forest, and chanced to hear him. He wondered at the sound, and sent his servants to inquire from whence the music proceeded. They looked about, but saw only a little animal upon a tree, which seemed like a cock, and had a hedgehog upon its back, which made the music. The king told them to ask why it sat there, and if it knew the way to his kingdom. Then Hans the Hedgehog came down from the tree, and said he would show the way if the king would promise him in writing what first met him in the royal court on his return. The king thought to himself, "Hans the Hedgehog understands nothing, and I can write what I please." So, taking pen and ink, he wrote something, and when he had done, Hans showed him the road, and he arrived happily at home. But his daughter, seeing him at a distance, was so full of joy that she ran to meet her father and kissed him. Then he remembered Hans the Hedgehog, and told her what had happened to him, and how he had promised to a wonderful animal whatever met him first, and how this animal sat upon a cock and played music. However, he had written he should not have the first, for Hans the Hedgehog could not read what was written. Thereupon the princess was glad, and said it was well done, for she could not have been given up to such a creature. Meanwhile, Hans the Hedgehog still tended his flocks and herds, and was very merry, sitting up in his tree and blowing his bagpipe. Now it happened that another king came traveling by with his attendants and courtiers, who had also lost himself and knew not how to get home, because the forest was so immense. All at once he heard the music at a distance, and said to his servant, "Go and see what that is." So the servant went under the tree, and saw the cock perched upon it, and the hedgehog on its back, and he asked what he did up there. "I am watching my flocks and herds, but what is your desire?" was the reply. The servant said they had lost their way, and could not find their kingdom, if he did not show them the road. Then Hans the Hedgehog climbed down the tree with his cock, and told the old king he would point out the path, if he would give him certainly whatever should meet him first before his royal palace. The king said, "Yes," and subscribed to it with his own hand, that he should have it. When this was done, Hans rode before the king on his cock, and showed him the road whereby he quickly arrived in safety in his own kingdom. As soon as he approached his court, there was great rejoicing, and his only child, a daughter who was very beautiful, ran to meet him, embraced and kissed him, in her great joy at seeing her dear father return home again. She inquired as to where he had stayed so long in the world, and he told her all his wanderings, and how he had feared he should not get back at all, because he had lost his way in such a large forest, where a creature, half like a hedgehog and half like a man, sat upon a cock in a high tree, and made beautiful music. He told her how this animal had come down from the tree, and showed him the road, on condition that he gave him whatever first met him in his royal palace on his return home. And she was the first, and that made him grieve. His daughter, after a while, promised to go with the animal. Then, when he came out of love to her dear father. Meanwhile, Hans the Hedgehog tended his swine, and so many pigs were born that they filled the whole forest. Then Hans would stay no longer in the woods, and sent his father word he should clear all the stables in the village, for he was coming with such great herds that whoever wished might kill from them. At this news the father was grieved, for he thought his son had been dead long since. Soon after, Hans came riding upon his cock, and driving before him his herds into the village to be killed. When there was such a slaughtering and shrieking, you might have heard it 8 miles off. Hans the Hedgehog did not stay long. He paid another visit to the smithy to have his cock rebridled. Then off he started again, while his father rejoiced that he should never see him again. Hans the Hedgehog rode to the first kingdom we before mentioned, and there the king had ordered that if anyone came riding upon a cock and carrying with him a bagpipe, all should shoot at him, cut at him, and kill him, that he might not enter the castle. When, therefore, Hans the Hedgehog came riding along, they pressed round him with bayonets, but he flew high up into the air, over the gate to the window of the palace, and there, alighting, called the king to give him what he had promised, or he would kill both him and his daughter. Then the king spoke kindly to his child, and begged her to go away, that her life and his might be saved. At last she consented, turning very pale, however, and her father gave her a carriage drawn by 6 white horses, and servants, money, and plate besides. She set herself in it, and Hans the Hedgehog by her side, with his cock and bagpipe. Then they took leave and drove away, while the king thought he should never see them again, and it happened just as he imagined. for as soon as they had gone a little way out of the city, Hans the Hedgehog pulled off the princess's shawl and pricked her with his quills, saying, "That is your reward for falsehood. Go away! I will have nothing to do with you." With these words, he hunted her home, and to her end she was despised. Hans the Hedgehog rode away next upon his cock with his bagpipes in his hand to the second kingdom, to which he had directed its king. The king had ordered that, if anyone like Hans the Hedgehog came riding to the gate, the guard should present arms, admit him freely, shout "Viva!" and conduct him to the palace. As soon as the princess saw the animal coming, she was at first frightened, because it appeared so curious. But as soon as she recollected her promise, she became reconciled. She welcomed Hans the Hedgehog, and was married to him, and afterwards they dined at the royal table, sitting side by side, and eating and drinking together. When evening came on, and bedtime, the princess said she was afraid of her husband's spikes, but he said she need not fear, he would do her no harm. Then he told the old king to appoint 4 men who should watch before the chamber door and keep up a great fire, and, when he entered and prepared to go to bed, he would creep out of his hedgehog skin and lay it down before the bed. When he had so done, the men must run in, snatch up the skin, and throw it in the fire, and keep it there till it was quite consumed. Afterwards, when the clock struck 12, Hans the Hedgehog entered his room, stripped off his skin, and laid it down by the bed. Immediately the 4 men ran in, snatched it up, and threw it into the fire, and as soon as it was consumed, Hans was freed, and lay in the bed in a proper human form, but coal-black, as if he was burnt. Thereupon the king sent to his physician, who washed the young prince with a precious balsam, which made his skin white, so that he became quite a handsome youth. As soon as the princess saw this, she jumped for joy, and the following morning they arose gladly, and were married again in due form, and with great feasting. And afterward Hans the Hedgehog received the kingdom from the hands of the old king. When several years had passed away, the young king went with his bride to his father's house, and told him he was his son. The farmer, however, declared he had no children. He had once, he said, had one who was covered with spikes like a hedgehog, but he had wandered away into the world. Then the king made himself known to his father, and showed that he was really his son, and the farmer rejoiced greatly, and returned with him to his kingdom. Thus ends Hans the Hedgehog. This next tale, I don't know about the title of this one, but it's entitled The Jew Among Thorns. So, given Germany's tumultuous history with Jews, I don't know exactly how this story is going to go. I have never read it. That's PC. But you could say someone's a Jew. But I don't know about that. This title. This title is God. What's the term I want to use? This title is gives me pause. Let's just say that. So let us read the tale of the Jew among thorns. God help me. The Jew Among Thorns by the brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time a rich man who had a servant so honest and industrious that he was every morning the first up, and every evening the last to come in. And, besides, whenever there was a difficult job to be done, which nobody else would undertake, this servant always volunteered his assistance. Moreover, he never complained, but was contented with everything, and happy under all circumstances. When his year of service was up, his master gave him no reward, for he thought to himself, "That will be the cleverest way, and, by saving his wages, I shall keep my man quietly in my service." The servant said nothing, but did his work during the second year as well as the first. But still he received nothing for it. So he made himself happy about the matter, and remained a year longer. When this third year was also past, the master considered and put his hand in his pocket, but drew nothing out. So the servant said, "I have served you honestly for 3 years, master. Be so good as to give me what I deserve, for I wish to leave, and look about me a bit in the world." "Yes, my good fellow," replied the covetous old man. "You have served me industriously, and therefore you shall be cheerfully rewarded." With these words he dipped his hand into his pocket, and drew out 3 farthings, which he gave to the servant, saying, "There, you have a farthing for each year, which is a much more bountiful and liberal reward than you would have received from most masters." The honest servant, who understood very little about money, jinked his capital, and thought, now I have a pocket full of money, so why need I plague myself any longer with hard work? So off he walked, skipping and jumping about from one side of the road to the other, full of joy. Presently he came to some bushes, out of which a little man slept, and called out, "Whither away, merry brother? I see you do not carry much burden in the way of cares." "Why should I be sad?" replied the servant. "I have enough. The wages of 3 years are rattling in my pocket." "How much is your treasure?" inquired the dwarf. "How much? 3 farthings, honestly counted out," said the servant. "Well," said the dwarf, "I am a poor, needy man. Give me your 3 farthings. I can work no longer, but you are young, and can earn your bread easily." Now because the servant had a compassionate heart, he pitied the old man, and handed him the 3 farthings, saying, "In the name of God take them, and I shall not want." Thereupon the little man said, "Because I see you have a good heart, I promise you 3 wishes, 1 for each farthing, and all shall be fulfilled." "Ah," exclaimed the servant, "you are one who can blow black and blue. Well, then, if it is to be so, I wish first for a gun, which I shall bring down all I aim at. Secondly, a fiddle, which shall make all who hear it dance. Thirdly, that whatever request I may make to any one, it shall not be in their power to refuse me." "All this you shall have," said the dwarf, and, diving into his pocket, he produced a fiddle and gun, as soon as you could think, in all readiness, as if they had been ordered long ago. These he gave to the servant, and then said to him, "Whatever you may ask, shall no man in the world be able to refuse." With that, he disappeared. "What more can you desire now, my heart?" said the servant to himself, and walked merrily onwards. Soon he met a Jew with a very long beard, who was standing listening to the song of a bird which hung high up upon a tree. "What a wonder," he was exclaiming, "that such a small creature should have an immense voice. If it were only mine! Oh, that I could strew some salt upon its tail." "If that is all," broke in the servant, "the bird shall soon be down." And, aiming with his gun, he pulled the trigger, and down it fell in the middle of a thorn bush. "Go, you rogue, and fetch the bird out," he said to the Jew. "Leave out the rogue, my master," returned the other. "Before the dog comes, I will fetch out the bird, because you killed it so well." So saying, the Jew went down on his hands and knees and crawled into the bush, and while he stuck fast among the thorns, the good servant felt so roguishly inclined that he took up his fiddle and began to play. At the same moment, the Jew was upon his legs and began to jump about. While the more the servant played, the better went the dance, but the thorns tore his shabby coat, combed out his beard, and pricked and stuck all over his body. "My master," cried the Jew, "what is your fiddling to me? Leave the fiddle alone. I do not want to dance." But the servant did not pay attention, and said to the Jew, while he played anew, so the poor man jumped higher than ever, and the rags of his clothes hung about the bushes. "You have fleeced people enough in your time, and now the—" Wow. Chad, please know that this story is a product of its time and place of origin. I do not hold any such beliefs as such as this. This is merely a story. Do not buy into the stereotypes. To continue. "Have fleeced people enough in your time, and now the thorny head shall give you a turn." "Oh, woe is me!" cried the Jew. "I will give the master what he desires, if only he leaves off fiddling, a purse of gold." "If you are so liberal," said the servant, "I will stop my music. But this I must say to your credit, that you dance as if you had been bred to it." And thereupon, taking the purse, he went his way. The Jew stood still and watched him out of sight, and then he began to abuse him with all his might. "You miserable musician! You beer tippler! Wait! If I do but catch you alone, I will hunt you till the soles of your shoes fall off, you ragamuffin, you farthing's worth!" And so he went on, calling him all the names he could lay his tongue to. As soon as he had regained his breath and arranged his dress a bit, he ran into the town to see the justice. "My lord judge," he said, "I have a story tale to tell. See how a rascally man has used me on the public highway, robbed and beaten me. A stone on the ground might pity me, my clothes all torn, my body scratched and wounded all over. Poverty come upon me with the loss of my purse, besides several ducats, one piece more valuable than all the others. For heaven's sake, let the man be put in prison." "Was it a soldier," inquired the judge, "who has thus cut you with his saber?" "God forbid!" called the Jew. "It was no sword the rogue had, but he carried a gun upon his shoulder, and a fiddle slung round his neck. The evil wretch is easily known." So the judge sent his people out after the man, and they soon found the servant, whom they drove slowly before them. When they found the purse upon him, as soon as he was set before the judge, he said, "I have not touched the Jew, nor taken his money, for he gave it to me of his own free will, because he wished me to cease my fiddling, which he could not endure." "Heaven defend us!" cried the Jew. "He tells lies as fast as he can catch the flies upon the wall." The judge would not believe his tale, and said, "This is a bad defense, for no Jew would do as you say." Wow. Just wow. Thereupon, because the robbery had been committed on the public road, he sentenced the good servant to be hanged. As he was led thither, the Jew began to abuse him, crying out, "You bearskin, you dog of a fiddler, now you shall receive your well-earned reward." But the servant walked quietly with the hangman to the gallows, and upon the last step of the ladder he turned round and said to the judge, "Grant me one request before I die." "Yes, if you do not ask for your life," said the judge. "Not life do I request, but that you will allow me to play one tune upon my fiddle for a last favor," replied the servant. The Jew raised a great cry of, "Murder! Murder, for God's sake! Do not allow it!" "Why should I not grant him this short enjoyment?" asked the judge. "It is almost all over with, and he shall have this last favor." However, he could not have refused the request which the servant had made. Then the Jew exclaimed, "Oh, woe is me! Hold me fast! Tie me fast!" When the servant, taking his fiddle from his neck, began to screw up, and no sooner had he given the first scrape than the judge, his clerk, and the hangman began to make steps, and the rope fell out of the hand of him who was going to bind the Jew. At the second scrape, all raised their legs, and the hangman let loose the good servant, and prepared for the dance. At the third scrape, all began to dance and caper about, the judge and the Jew being the first performers, and, as he continued to play, all joined in the dance, and even the people who had gathered in the market out of curiosity, old and young, fat and thin, one with another. The dogs, likewise, as they came by, got up on their hind legs and capered about, and the longer he played, the higher sprang the dancers, till they toppled down over each other on their heads, and began to shriek terribly. At length the judge cried, quite out of breath, "I will give you your life, if you will stop fiddling." The good servant thereupon had compassion, and dismounting the ladder, he hung his fiddle round his neck again. Then he stepped up to the Jew, who lay upon the ground, panting for breath, and said, "You rascal, tell me now whence you got the money, or I will take my fiddle and begin again." I stole it, cried the Jew, "but you have honestly earned it." Upon this the judge caused the Jew to be hung on the gallows as a thief, while the good servant went on his way, rejoicing in his happy escape. Thus ends The Jew Among the Thorns. I knew that would not end well. Ay. Chat, why? Just why?
Sounds like something my mom would do. Bad thing, or playing until he stopped.
Oh, playing a musical instrument until you capitulated?
Mm-hmm. Did it with a banjo. Literally did it with a banjo when I was growing up.
Thank God I did not have a mother like that. Anyway, chat.
This is us for the workshops.
Thank God that that story was a little, short. Yeah. Because, I don't think I can go through very much more anti-Semitism. So, this next story is entitled The Goose Girl. I sincerely hope she is not goose-stepping. So, let us... And now for something completely different. Completely anti-Semitic. Non-anti-Semitic. Oi.
Really?
Yes, really. So let us begin. The Goose Girl by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there lived an old queen whose husband had been dead some years and had left her with a beautiful daughter. When this daughter grew up, she was betrothed to a king's son who lived far away, and when the time arrived that she should be married, it became necessary that she should travel into a strange country, and so the old lady packed up for her use much costly furniture, utensils of gold and silver, cups and jars, in short, all that belonged to a royal bridal treasure, for she loved her child dearly. She sent also a maid to wait upon her, and to give her away to the bridegroom, and 2 horses for the journey. And the horse of the princess, called Falada, could speak. As soon as the hour of departure arrived, the mother took her daughter into a chamber, and there, with a knife, she cut her finger with it so that it bled. Then she held a napkin beneath, and let 3 drops of blood fall into it, which she gave to her daughter, saying, "Dear child, preserve this well, and it will help you out of trouble." Afterwards, the mother and daughter took a sorrowful leave of each other, and the princess placed the napkin in her bosom, mounted her horse, and rode away to her intended bridegroom. After she had ridden on for about an hour, she became very thirsty, and said to her servant, "Dismount and procure me some water from yonder stream in the cup which you carry with you, for I am very thirsty." "If you are thirsty," replied the servant, "dismount yourself and stoop down to drink the water, for I will not be your maid." The princess, on account of her great thirst, did as she was bid, and, bending over the brook, she drank of its water without daring to use her golden cup. While she did so, the 3 drops of blood said, "Ah, if thy mother knew this, her heart would break." And the princess felt humbled, but said nothing, and soon remounted her horse. She then rode several miles further, but the day was so hot and the sun so scorching that soon she felt thirsty again, and as soon as she reached a stream, she called her handmaiden again, and bade her take the golden cup and fill it with water, for she had forgotten all the saucy words which had passed. The maiden, however, replied more naughtily than before, "If you wish to drink, help yourself. I will not be your maid." The princess thereupon got off her horse and helped herself at the stream, while she wept and cried. "Ah, woe is me!" And the 3 drops of blood said again, "If your mother knew this, her heart would break." As she leaned over the water, the napkin wherein 3 drops of blood fell out of her bosom and floated down the stream without her perceiving it, because of her great anguish. But the servant had seen what happened, and she was glad, for now she had power over her mistress, because, with the loss of the drops of blood, she became weak and powerless. When, then, she would mount again upon her horse, Falada, the maid, said, "No, Falada belongs to me. You must get upon this horse." And she was forced to yield. Then the servant bade her take off her royal clothes and put on her common ones instead. And, lastly, she made the princess promise and swear by the open sky that she would say naught of what had passed at the king's palace. For if she had not so sworn, she would have been murdered. But Falada observed all that passed with great attention. Now was the servant mounted upon Falada, and the rightful princess upon a sorry hack. And in that way they travelled on till they came to the king's palace. On their arrival there were great rejoicings, and the young prince, running towards them, lifted the servant off her horse, supposing that she was the true bride, and she was led up the steps in state, while the real princess had to stop below. Just then the old king chanced to look out of his window, and saw her standing in the court, and he remarked how delicate and beautiful she was, and, going to the royal apartments, he inquired there of the bride who it was she had brought with her, and left below in the courtyard. "Only a girl whom I brought with me for company," said the bride. "Give the wench some work to do, that she may not grow idle." The old king, however, had no work for her, and knew of nothing, until at last he said, "Ah, there is a boy who keeps the geese. She can help him." This youth was called Conrad, and the true bride was set to keep geese with him. Soon after, this false bride and her betrothed said to her betrothed, "Dearest, will you grant me a favor?" "Yes," said he, with the greatest pleasure." "Then let a knacker," which is one who buys and slaughters worn-out horses and sells the flesh for dog food and other things, "be summoned, that he may cut off the head of the horse on which I rode hither, for it has angered me on the way." In reality, she feared lest the horse might tell how she had used the rightful princess, and she was glad when it was decided that Falada should die. This came to the ears of the princess, and she promised secretly to the knacker to give him a piece of gold if he would show her a kindness, which was that he would nail the head of Falada over a certain large and gloomy arch through which she had to pass daily with the geese, so that then she might still see as she had been accustomed to her old steed. The knacker promised, and, after killing the horse, nailed the head in the place which was pointed out over the door of the arch. Early in the morning, when she and Conrad drove the geese through the arch, she said in passing, "Ah, Falada, that you should hang there." And the head replied, "Ah, princess, that you should pass here. If thy mother knew thy fate, then her heart would surely break." Yeah, this isn't better. Yeah, this is not better. But, I mean, she did what she could. Kind of a morbid trophy, though. Then she drove on through the town to a field, and when they arrived on the meadow, she sat down and unloosened her hair, which was of a pure gold, and its shining appearance so charmed Conrad that he endeavored to pull out a couple of locks. So she sang. Blow, blow, thou wind, blow Conrad's hat away, it's rolling, do not stay, till I have combed my hair and tied it up behind. Immediately there came a strong wind, which took Conrad's hat quite off his head, and led him a rare dance all over the meadows, so that when he returned, what was combing and curling, the princess had rearranged her hair, so that he could not catch a loose lock. This made Conrad very angry, and he would not speak to her, so that all day long they tended their geese in silence, and at evening they went home. The following morning they passed again under the gloomy arch, and the true princess said, Ah, Falada, that you should hang there. And Falada replied, Ah, princess, that you should pass here. If thy mother knew thy fate, then her heart would surely break. Afterwards, when they got into the meadow, Conrad tried again to snatch one of her golden locks, but she sang immediately. Blow, blow, thou wind, blow Conrad's hat away. It's rolling, do not stay, till I have combed my hair and tied it up behind. So the wind blew and carried the hat so far away that, by the time Conrad had caught it again, her hair was all combed out, and not a single one loose, so they kept their geese till evening as before. After they returned home, Conrad went to the old king, and declared he would no longer keep geese with the servant. Why not? Said the old king. Oh, she vexes me all day long, said Conrad, and then the king bade himself relate all that had happened. So Conrad did, and told how in the morning, when they passed through a certain archway, she spoke to a horse's head, which was nailed up over the door, and said, Ah, Falada, that you should hang there. And it replied, Ah, princess, that you should pass here. If thy mother knew thy fate, then her heart would surely break. And further, when they arrived in the meadow, how she caused the wind to blow his hat off, so that he had to run after it ever so far. When he had finished his tale, the old king ordered him to drive the geese out again the next morning, and he himself, when morning came, stationed himself behind the gloomy archway, and heard the servant talk to the head of Falada. Then he followed them also into the fields, and hid himself in a thicket by the meadow. And there he saw with his own eyes the goose girl and the boy drive in their geese. And after a while she sat down, and unloosening her hair, which shone like gold, began to sing the old rhyme. Blow, blow, thou wind, blow Conrad's hat away. It's rolling, do not stay, till I have combed up my hair and tied it up behind. Then the king felt a breeze come, which took off Conrad's hat, so that he had to run a long way after it, while the goose girl combed out her hair and put it back in proper trim before his return. All this the king observed, and then went home unremarked, and when the goose girl returned at evening, he called her aside, and asked her what it all meant. That I dare not tell you, nor any other man, replied she, for I have sworn by the free sky not to speak of my griefs, else I had lost my life. The king pressed her to say what it was, and left her no peace about it, but still she refused. So at last he said, If you will not tell me, tell your griefs to this fireplace, and he went away. Then she crept into the fireplace and began to weep and groan, and soon she relieved her heart by telling her tale. "Here sit I," she said, "forsaken by all the world, and yet I am a king's daughter, and a false servant has exercised some charm over me, whereby I was compelled to lay aside my royal clothes, and she has also taken my place at the bridegroom's side, and I am forced to perform the common duties of a goose girl. Oh, if my mother knew this, her heart would break with grief." The old king, meanwhile, stood outside by the chimney and listened to what she said, and when she had finished, he came in and called her away from the fireplace. Then her royal clothes were put on, and it was a wonder to see how beautiful she was. And the old king, calling his son, showed him that it was a false bride whom he had taken, who was only a servant girl. But the true bride stood there as a goose girl. The young king was glad indeed at heart when he saw her beauty and virtue, and a great feast was announced, to which all people and good friends were invited. On a raised platform sat the bridegroom, with the princess on one side and the servant girl on the other. But the latter was dazzled, and recognized her mistress no longer in her shining dress. When they had finished their feasting, and were beginning to be gay, the old king said a riddle to the servant girl. What such as one were worthy of who had, in such and such a manner, deceived her masters, and he related all that had happened to the true bride. The servant girl replied, "Such an one deserves nothing better than to be put in a cask, stuck all round with sharp nails, and then by 2 horses to be dragged through the street after street till the wench be killed." "Thou art the woman, then," exclaimed the king. "Thou hast proclaimed thine own punishment, and it shall be strictly fulfilled." The sentence was immediately carried into effect, and afterwards the young king married his rightful bride, and together they ruled their kingdom long in peace and happiness. Thus ends the tale of the Goose Girl. This next story is entitled The Valiant Tailor. So let us begin. The Valiant Tailor by the Brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time an excessively proud princess who proposed a puzzle to everyone who came a-courting, and he who did not solve it was sent away with ridicule and scorn. This conduct was talked about everywhere, and it was said that whoever was lucky enough to guess the riddle would have the princess for a wife. About that time it happened that 3 tailors came in company to the town where the princess dwelt, and the 2 elder of them were confident, when they heard the report, that they should without doubt be successful, since they had made so many fine and good stitches. The 3rd tailor was an idle, good-for-nothing fellow, who did not understand his own trade, but still likewise was sure of his own powers of guessing a riddle. The 2 others, however, would fain have persuaded him to stop at home, but he was obstinate, and said he would go, for he had set his heart upon it. and thereupon he marched off as if the whole world belonged to him. The three tailors presented themselves before the princess, and told her they were come to solve her riddle, for they were the only proper people, since each of them had an understanding so fine that one could thread a needle with it. "Then," said the princess, "it is this. I have a hair upon my head of 2 colors. Which are they?" "If that is all," said the first man, "it is black and white, like the cloth which is called pepper and salt." "Wrong," said the princess. "Now, second man, try." "It is not black and white, but brown and red," said he, "like my father's holiday coat." "Wrong again," cried the princess. "Now try, third man, who I see will be sure to guess rightly." The little tailor stepped forward, bold as brass, and said, "The princess has a gold and silver hair upon her head, and those are the 2 colors." When the princess heard this, she turned pale, and very nearly fell down to the ground with fright, for the tailor had guessed her riddle, which she believed nobody in the world could have solved. As soon as she recovered herself, she said to the tailor, "That is not all you have to do. In the stable below lies a bear, with which you must pass the night, and if you are alive when I come in the morning, I will marry you." The little tailor readily consented, exclaiming, "Bravely ventured is half won." But the princess thought herself quite safe, for as yet the bear had spared no one who came within reach of its paws. As soon as evening came, the little tailor was taken to the place where the bear lay, and, as soon as he entered the stable, the beast made a spring at him. "Softly, softly," cried the tailor. "I must teach you manners." And out of his pocket he took some nuts, which he had cracked between his teeth quite unconcernedly. As soon as the bear saw this, he took a fancy to have some nuts also, and the tailor gave him a handful out of his pocket, not of nuts, but of pebbles. The bear put them into his mouth, but he could not crack them, try all he might. "What a blockhead I am!" he cried to himself. "I can't crack a few nuts. Will you crack them for me?" he said to the tailor. "What a fellow you are!" exclaimed the tailor, "with such a big mouth as that, and can't crack a small nut." With these words he cunningly substituted a nut for the pebble with which the bear handed him, and soon cracked it. "I must try once more," said the bear. "It seems an easy matter to manage." And he bit and bit with all his strength, but, as you may believe, all to no purpose. When the beast was tired, the little tailor produced a fiddle out of his coat, and played a tune upon it, which soon as the bear heard, he began to dance in spite of himself. In a little while he stopped and asked the tailor whether it was easy to learn the art of fiddling. Easy as child's play," said the tailor. "You lay your left fingers on the strings, and with the right hold the bow, and then away it goes, merrily, merrily, hopsusa, oi valera. "Oh, well, that is fiddling," cried the bear. "I may as well learn that, and then I can dance as often as I like. What do you think? Will you give me instruction?" "With all my heart," replied the tailor, "if you are clever enough. But let me see your claws. They are frightfully long, and I must cut them a bit." By chance, a vice was lying in one corner. on which the bear laid his paws, and the tailor screwed them fast. "Now wait till I come with the scissors," said he, and, leaving the bear, groaning and growling, he laid himself down in a corner on a bundle of straw and went to sleep. Meanwhile, the princess was rejoicing to think she had got rid of the tailor, and especially when she heard the bear growling, for she thought it was with satisfaction for his prey. In the morning, accordingly, she went down to the stable, but as soon as she looked in, she saw the tailor as fresh and lively as a fish in water. She was much alarmed, but it was of no use, for her word had been openly pledged to the marriage, and the king, her father, ordered a carriage to be brought, in which she and the tailor went away to the church to the wedding. Just as they had set off, the two other tailors, who were very envious of their brother's fortune, went into the stable and released the bear, who immediately ran after the carriage which contained the bridal party. The princess heard the beast growling and groaning, and became very much frightened, and cried to the tailor, "Oh, the bear is coming behind, coming to fetch you away." The tailor was up in a minute, stood on his head, put his feet out of the window, and cried to the bear, "Do you see this vice? If you do not go away, you shall have a taste of it." The bear considered him a minute, and then turned tail and ran back, while the tailor drove on to church with the princess, and made her his wife, and very happy they were after the marriage, as merry as larks, and to the end of their lives they lived in contentment. Thus ends the story of the valiant tailor. This next story is entitled The Blue Light. So let us begin. The Blue Light by the Brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time a soldier who had served his king faithfully for many years. But when the war came to a close, the soldier, on account of his many wounds, was disabled, and the king said to him, "You may go home, for I no longer need you, but you will not receive any more pay. For I have no money, but for those who render me a service for it." The soldier did not know where to earn a livelihood, and, full of care, he walked on the whole day, ignorant whither he went, till about night he came to a large forest. Through the darkness which covered everything, he saw a light, and approaching it, he found a hut wherein dwelt a witch. "Please give me a night's lodging and something to eat and drink, or I shall perish," said he to the old woman. "Oh ho! Who gives anything to a worn-out soldier?" she replied. "Still, out of compassion, I will take you in, if you do what I desire." The soldier asked what she wished, and she told him she wanted her garden dug over. To this he willingly consented, and the following day, accordingly, he worked with all his strength, but could not get his work finished by evening. "I see very well," said the witch, "that you cannot get further today, so I will shelter you another night, and in return you shall fetch me a pile of logs tomorrow, and chop them small." The soldier worked all day long at his job, but he did not finish till quite the evening. The witch again proposed that he should stop the night. "You shall have but a very little work tomorrow," said she. "I want you to fetch me out a half-dry well behind my house, my blue light, which floats there without ever going out." The next morning, accordingly, the old witch led him to the well, and let him down into it in a basket. He soon found the blue light, and made a sign to be drawn up. And as soon as he reached the top, the old woman tried to snatch the blue light out of his hand. "No, no," cried the soldier, perceiving her wicked intentions. "No, no, I don't give up the light till both my feet stand on dry ground." The witch flew into a passion when he said so, and letting him fall down into the well again, went away. The poor soldier fell without injury on the soft mud, and the blue light kept burning, but to what use? He saw well that he should not escape death. For a while he sat there in great trouble, and at length, searching in his pocket, he took out his tobacco pipe, which was only half smoked out. "This shall be my last consolation," said he to himself, and, lighting the pipe at the blue light, he began to puff. As soon now as the smoke began to ascend, a little black man suddenly stood before the soldier and asked, "Master, what are your commands?" "What are my commands?" repeated the astonished soldier. "I must do all you desire," replied the dwarf. "That is well," said the soldier. "Then help me first out of this well." The dwarf thereupon took him by the hand and led him through a subterraneous passage out of the well, while he carried the blue light with him. On the way he showed the soldier the concealed treasure of the witch, of which he took as much as he could carry, and as soon as they were out of the ground, he bade the dwarf fetch the old witch and take her before the judge. In a very short time she was brought riding on a wild cat, which made a fearful noise and ran as swiftly as the wind, and the dwarf, taking them before the judge, quickly returned to his master with the news that the witch was hung on the gallows. "Master, what else have you to command?" inquired the dwarf. "Nothing further at the present," replied the soldier. "And now you can go home. Only be at hand when I summon you again." Well, well, well. There is an echo in that well. Of course, he also found Timmy down it. "All that is necessary for that," said the dwarf, "is that you should light your pipe at the blue lamp, and immediately I shall present myself." With these words, the little man disappeared. Then the soldier returned to the city from whence he first came, and, going to the head inn, ordered some fine clothes, and bade the landlord furnish him a room in the most expensive style. As soon as it was ready, the soldier took possession of it, and summoned the black dwarf, to whom he said, "The king of this city I served formerly for many years faithfully, but he sent me away to suffer hunger, and now I will take my revenge." "What shall I do then?" inquired the dwarf. "Late in the evening, when the king's daughter is asleep, you must fetch her out of her bed, and bring her here to wait upon me as my maidservant." The dwarf expostulated with the soldier, but to no purpose, telling him that though it would be an easy matter for him to bring her, it might cause him danger if it were found out. Accordingly, when 12 o'clock struck, the dwarf appeared with the princess. "Aha! You are there," cried the soldier to the princess. "Come, fetch your brush and sweep the room." When she had done that, he called her to his seat and, stretching his feet out, bade her pull off his boots. This she did, and as he threw the boots in her face, she was obliged to go and wash herself. But all was done by her with eyes half shut, without complaint or resistance, and the first crow of the cock, the dwarf carried her back again to bed in the royal castle. The next morning, when the princess arose, she went to her father and told him what a curious dream she had had. "I was carried," she said, "through the streets with lightning speed, and taken to the room of a soldier, whom I waited upon at his maid, as his maid, even sweeping the room and polishing his boots. But it was only a dream, and yet I am as tired as if I had really done all this work." "The dream may have been real," said the king, "and so I will give you this piece of advice. Tonight, fill your pocket with peas, and make a hole in it, so that if you are fetched again, they will drop through as you go along, and leave a trace on the road." When the king spoke this, the dwarf was standing by, and overheard all he said. And at night he strewed peas in every street, so that those dropped by the princess, as he carried her along, were no guide afterwards. The poor maiden had again to do all sorts of hard work till the first cock crow, when the dwarf took her home to bed. The next morning the king sent out his servants to seek traces of his daughter's journey, but it was all in vain. For every street the children were picking up the peas and saying, "It has rained peas during the night." "We must think of some other plan," said the king, when his servants returned unsuccessful, and he advised his daughter to keep her shoes on when she went to bed, and then, if she were carried off, she must leave one behind in the room whither she was taken, and in the morning it should be searched after. But the black dwarf again overheard the plan, and counseled the soldier not to have the princess that evening, for there was no remedy for the stratagem her father had planned. The soldier, however, would be obeyed, although the finding of the shoe would be a serious offense, and the poor princess was obliged again to work like any servant. But she managed to conceal one of her shoes beneath the bed before she was taken back to the palace. The following morning the king ordered the whole city to be searched for his daughter's shoe, and it was discovered in the room of the soldier, who, however, at the entreaty of the dwarf, had slipped out at the door. He was soon caught and thrown into prison, but, unfortunately, he had left behind his best possessions, the blue light and his gold, and had only a single ducat with him in his pocket. While he stood at the window of his cell, laden with chains, he perceived one of his old comrades passing by, so he knocked at the bars and beckoned his comrade, whom he asked to go to the inn and bring back a bundle which he had left behind, and he should receive a ducat for the service. The man ran away, and soon returned with the wished-for bundle. As soon, then, as the soldier was alone, he lighted his pipe and summoned up the dwarf. "Be not afraid," said the black mannikin. "Go whither you are led, and let everything happen as it may. Only take with you the blue light." The next day the soldier was brought up to be tried, and although he had done no great wrong, he was condemned to death by the judge. When he was led out for execution, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "Permit me to smoke one pipe before I die." "You may smoke 3 if you please," said the king, "but do not expect me to spare your life." Thereupon the soldier drew out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and before a couple of wreaths of smoke had ascended, the black dwarf appeared, holding a little cudgel in his hand, and asked, "What are your commands, master?" "Knock down first the unjust judge and his constables, and do not spare the king even, who has treated me so shabbily." The little black dwarf commenced wielding his cudgel, and at every blow down went a man who never ventured to rise again. The king was terribly frightened when he saw this, and begged for mercy, but the soldier only pardoned him on the condition of his giving him his daughter to wife, and his kingdom to rule. And to this the unhappy king consented, for he had no choice. Thus ends the story of the blue light. Right, so chat, we are going to end there. And we are going to find someone to raid into. On the kick side, we don't have enough people to host. We need 5. On the Twitch side, let us see whomst we can raid into. Let us see who's alive. Abiko is doing her partnerversary. Pippa is playing Asherlane. Let's drop in on Abiko for her partnerversary. So, a quick shout. That is on the Twitch side. So, I want to thank you all for stopping by. Definitely appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Goodbye for now.